July 17, 1948, Tempelhof Airport, West Berlin. Lieutenant Gail Halverson stood at the fence watching German children, 30 or 40 kids, ages maybe 6 to 14, pressed against the chain link, watching American cargo planes land every 3 minutes. Giant C-54 Skymasters bringing food and coal to a city the Soviets were trying to starve. The children watched silently, not begging, not asking for anything, just watching, hungry eyes following each plane, hoping, waiting, enduring. Gail had been flying the Berlin airlift for 2 weeks, 24 years old, Air Force pilot from Utah. He'd flown missions over Germany during the war, dropped bombs on German cities, helped defeat Nazi Germany. Now, 3 years later, he was back, flying into Berlin, not dropping bombs, dropping flour and coal, not destroying, sustaining. The irony wasn't lost on him. He approached the fence. The children didn't mob him, didn't rush forward with hands out begging. They just stood there, polite, quiet. German discipline even in children who were starving. Gail tried his broken German, asked if they were okay, asked if they needed anything. The children said they were fine. They had freedom. The Americans had given them that. The airlift was feeding the city. They were grateful. They asked for nothing. Gail reached into his pocket, found 2 sticks of Wrigley's double mint gum. All he had. He broke the sticks into pieces, passed them through the fence. 30 kids. Maybe 8 pieces of gum total. The children who got pieces didn't chew them. They tore the wrapper into strips, passed the strips around. Everyone smelled the gum. The ones without pieces didn't complain, didn't fight, just smelled the wrapper and smiled, content with that, grateful for even the smell of something sweet. Gail watched this, and something broke inside him. These were German kids. 3 years ago, their fathers and brothers had been shooting at Americans. 3 years ago, Gail had been bombing their cities. Now they were hungry. Their city was divided. Their country split. The Soviets were blockading West Berlin. 2 million people trapped, starving. And these kids were grateful just to smell gum wrapper. Not even the gum itself, just the wrapper, just the memory of sweetness. He told them he'd be back tomorrow. He'd bring more, but there were so many of them. How would they know which plane was his? The kids asked how they'd recognize his plane among the dozens landing. Gail thought for a moment, said he'd wiggle his wings, rock the plane back and forth as he approached. That would be the signal. His plane, the one bringing treats. The children's eyes lit up. Really? You'll come back. You'll bring more. Gail promised. I'll wiggle my wings. You'll know it's me. The Berlin airlift was the Western response to Soviet aggression. After World War II, Germany was divided into 4 occupation zones: American, British, French, Soviet, Berlin. The capital sat deep inside the Soviet zone, but Berlin itself was also divided into 4 sectors. The Soviets controlled East Berlin and all territory around the city. The Western Allies controlled West Berlin, an island of democracy 110 miles inside communist territory. 2 million West Berliners dependent on supply routes through Soviet-controlled land. On June 24, 1948, the Soviets closed all ground access to West Berlin. No trains, no trucks, no roads, nothing. They wanted the Western Allies out, wanted all of Berlin, thought they could starve the West into abandoning the city. President Truman faced a choice: abandon West Berlin, or supply the city by air. Abandoning meant betraying 2 million people, meant letting communism win, but supplying by air seemed impossible. Berlin needed 4,500 tons of supplies daily just to survive. Coal for heat, food for people, medicine, everything. No one had ever supplied a city by air before. The Soviets were certain it couldn't be done. The Western Allies tried anyway. Operation Vittles, the Americans called it. Operation Planefare, the British called it. The Berlin airlift. Starting June 26th, cargo planes began flying into Berlin. At first, just a few dozen flights daily, bringing hundreds of tons, not nearly enough. The Soviets waited for the airlift to fail. Waited for winter when heat would be critical and flying dangerous. Waited for the West to admit defeat. But the airlift didn't fail. It grew. More planes, more flights, better organization. By July 1948, planes were landing in Berlin every 3 minutes, around the clock, day and night, rain or shine. American and British cargo planes bringing life to a city the Soviets wanted dead. Gail Halverson was one of hundreds of pilots flying the airlift. Each mission was identical. Load the plane in West Germany, fly the corridor to Berlin, land at Tempelhof, unload, take off, fly back, load again, repeat. 3 round trips daily, sometimes 4. Every 3 minutes another plane landing, precision flying, formation work, timing critical. One mistake meant collision, meant death, meant the Soviets winning. The pressure was immense, but the mission was clear. Keep Berlin alive. Don't let the Soviets win. Show them democracy works. Show them Americans don't abandon their friends. After meeting the children at the fence, Gale couldn't stop thinking about them. That night in his quarters, he counted his chocolate ration. 3 Hershey bars. Some chewing gum. Not much, but more than those kids had. He decided to bring it all. Next flight, he'd drop it to them. But how? He couldn't land and distribute it. No time. The planes had to maintain schedule. 3-minute intervals. Any delay cascaded through the whole system. Hundreds of planes stacked up. So he'd drop it from the plane. Attach the candy to handkerchief parachutes. Drop it as he approached. The kids would see him wiggle his wings. Know it was him. Run to where the candy landed. Simple. His co-pilot thought he was crazy. You're going to drop what? Candy. To German kids, using handkerchief parachutes. You could get court-martialed. Gale shrugged. Probably. But I promised those kids. His co-pilot shook his head, then helped tie candy to handkerchiefs. If you're going to be crazy, at least do it right. They used handkerchiefs from Gale's footlocker, tied the corners together, attached Hershey bars and gum, made 3 parachutes, crude but functional. Gale put them in his flight bag, ready for the next mission. July 18th. Gale's approach to Tempelhof. He wiggled the wings, rocked the C-54 back and forth. Below, he saw the children running to the fence, 30 or 40 kids. Looking up, waiting. Gale opened the small cockpit window, tossed out the parachutes, 3 tiny white handkerchiefs floating down. The children scrambled, grabbed the parachutes, found the candy. Gale saw them jumping and waving. He waggled his wings again, climbed out. Mission complete. He'd kept his promise. 3 kids got candy. 37 didn't. Math was harsh, but it was something. Better than nothing. Better than breaking a promise to children who'd already lost everything. He thought that was the end of it. One small gesture. 3 kids with candy. Done. But when he returned to his quarters that evening, there was a letter waiting. Hand delivered to Tempelhof. Addressed to Uncle Wiggly Wings. The letter was from a German child. In broken English. Thank you for the chocolate. It was wonderful. My brother and I shared it. Can you bring more? Please. We wait by the fence every day. We watch for the wiggling wings. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The letter was signed with a child's scrawl. Had a return address. A Berlin apartment building. Gale read the letter twice. Uncle Wiggly Wings. The kids had given him a name. They were waiting for him, expecting more. He checked his rations. He had nothing left. He'd given everything, but he couldn't disappoint them. He went to other pilots, explained what he'd done, asked if anyone had candy to spare. Most pilots laughed. You're dropping what? To German kids. Are you insane? These are the people who started the war, who killed Americans. Now you want to give them candy. But some pilots understood, remembered that war was over, that these were children, not soldiers, that hunger wasn't political, that showing kindness to former enemies might do more to win peace than any treaty. They donated their rations, chocolate bars, gum, candy, anything sweet. Gale collected it all, made more parachutes. This time he had enough for maybe 10 kids. Progress. The next flight he wiggled wings again, dropped 10 parachutes. The children retrieved them all. No fighting, no grabbing. The kids who got candy shared with those who didn't. Break the chocolate into pieces. Pass them around. Everyone gets a taste. That German discipline again. That fairness. That sense that they were all in this together. Suffering together. Surviving together. Americans bringing food from the sky, teaching them that former enemies could be friends. Gale kept doing it. Every flight. Wiggle wings, drop candy. More letters started arriving. Dozens. Then hundreds. Children writing to Uncle Wiggly Wings. Thank you for the chocolate. My sister loved it. Can you bring more? We tell all our friends. Everyone watches for your plane. You're famous. Please don't stop. The letters were in German and English. Some had drawings, pictures of planes with wiggling wings, pictures of parachutes, pictures of smiling children eating chocolate. Gale kept every letter, read them all, felt the weight of hundreds of kids waiting for him. He needed more supplies. His own rations weren't enough. Even with other pilots donating, it wasn't enough. There were thousands of Berlin children. He could only supply dozens. The math was impossible. But word started spreading. American newspapers picked up the story. The candy bomber, they called him. Uncle Wiggly Wings. The pilot dropping chocolate to German kids. Human interest story in the middle of Cold War tension. Americans read about it and responded. Schools organized candy drives. Churches collected chocolate. Companies donated. Hundreds of pounds of candy started arriving in Germany. Addressed to Lieutenant Gail Halverson. For the Berlin children. From America with love. The operation grew beyond one pilot. Other pilots started dropping candy too, wiggling their wings. Hundreds of tiny parachutes floating down over Berlin. Children running to collect them. The Soviets hated it. Called it propaganda. Called it psychological warfare. Accused the Americans of trying to corrupt German children with capitalist decadence. But the kids didn't care about politics. They cared about chocolate. About American pilots who remembered they were human. About tiny parachutes bringing sweetness to a city that had known nothing but bitterness for years. General Tunner, the airlift commander, heard about Gail's unauthorized candy drops. Called him in. Gail expected punishment. Expected to be grounded. Maybe sent home. Instead, Tunner asked him one question. Is this helping morale? Gail said, yes, sir. The kids are responding. The Berliners see we care. We're not just bringing food, we're bringing hope. Tunner nodded. Then make it official. Operation Little Vittles. You're in charge. Coordinate with other pilots. Get more supplies. Do it right. Just don't crash any planes. We need every aircraft flying. Operation Little Vittles became a phenomenon. American candy manufacturers donated tons of chocolate. Hershey, Mars, Wrigley, companies that had supplied troops during the war, now supplying former enemies. Civilians made thousands of handkerchief parachutes. Schools in America adopted schools in Berlin. Pen pals between American and German children. Packages crossing the Atlantic. Candy going one way. Letters and drawings coming back. A generation of Americans and Germans learning they weren't enemies. Learning that people on both sides were just people. The tonnage of candy dropped wasn't significant. Maybe a few tons over months. Nothing compared to the thousands of tons of food and coal delivered daily. But the psychological impact was enormous. Berlin children learned Americans weren't monsters. Americans learned German children weren't little Nazis. Both sides learned that kindness crosses borders, that generosity heals hatred, that chocolate on a parachute does more for peace than 1,000 diplomatic cables. Mercedes Wild was 9 years old in Berlin during the blockade. Her neighborhood was in the British sector, but she could see American planes landing at Tempelhof. She went to the fence with other children, waited for Uncle Wiggly Wings, got a parachute with 2 Hershey bars, took them home. Her mother cried, not because of the chocolate, because an American soldier who could have hated them instead gave them candy, because their former enemies were keeping them alive, because kindness was possible even after war. Mercedes kept that handkerchief her entire life. 80 years later, she still had it, yellowed and fragile, but preserved. A reminder that goodness exists. Peter Zimmerman was 12. He watched his father die during the war, watched Berlin burn, watched his mother struggle to feed 3 children during the blockade. He was angry, bitter, hated everyone. Then he caught a parachute. Inside was chocolate and a note. From American school children. We hope you like this. We're praying for you. From friends in America. Peter read that note and cried. He'd spent 3 years hating Americans. Now Americans were feeding him, praying for him, calling themselves his friends. It broke something in him. The hatred, the bitterness, all of it. He wrote back, thank you. You saved me. Not just from hunger, from hate. The letters kept coming. Thousands, then tens of thousands. Gail and other pilots tried to read them all. Impossible. Too many. But they tried. Each letter represented a child, a life touched, a moment of connection across the divide of language and history and war. Some letters asked for candy. Some just said thank you. Some shared stories. My father died in the war. We have nothing. Your chocolate gave us hope. Some drew pictures. Planes with wiggling wings. Parachutes with candy. American and German flags together. Children drawing peace. The Soviet blockade lasted 318 days. From June 24, 1948 to May 12, 1949. Nearly 11 months. The Soviets were certain the airlift would fail, certain winter would break it, certain the West would give up. They were wrong. The airlift succeeded. 228 flights, 2.3 million tons of supplies delivered, an American or British plane landing in Berlin every 30 seconds at peak, the most successful humanitarian airlift in history. The Soviets lifted the blockade May 12th. They'd lost. Berlin remained free. Democracy had won, not through force, through persistence, through showing up, through proving that free people working together could achieve the impossible. Gail Halvorson flew 126 missions during the airlift, dropped approximately 3 tons of candy, made thousands of handkerchief parachutes, wiggled his wings every single approach, never missed. The children waited for him. Uncle Wiggly Wings, their American friend who brought chocolate and hope. When the blockade ended and the airlift scaled down, Gail prepared to leave Berlin. He went to the fence one last time. The children were there, waiting. He had no candy left. All the supplies had been distributed. He had nothing to give them except gratitude. Thank you for letting me do this. Thank you for being so kind. Thank you for teaching me that enemies can become friends. The children gave him letters, hundreds of them, collected from kids all over Berlin. Thank you, Uncle Wiggly Wings. We'll never forget you. You showed us Americans have good hearts. You fed us when we were hungry. But more than that, you made us feel human again, made us feel worthy of kindness. After everything that happened, after the war, after the horror, you treated us like we mattered, like we were children, not enemies. We'll remember that forever. We'll tell our children and grandchildren about the American pilots who brought chocolate on parachutes, who wiggled their wings, who proved that love is stronger than hate. Gail Halvorson returned to America in 1949, continued his Air Force career, eventually became a colonel, commanded bases, flew for 30 years, but he never forgot Berlin, never forgot the children at the fence. For the rest of his life, he kept the letters, kept the handkerchiefs, kept the drawings, reminders of what one person with 2 sticks of gum and an idea could do, reminders that small gestures of kindness ripple outward, that chocolate on a parachute changes lives. In 1970, Gail returned to Berlin. 22 years after the airlift, the city was still divided, still occupied. The Berlin Wall now splitting it, but West Berlin was thriving, free, democratic, rebuilt. Gail went to Tempelhof. The fence was gone. No children waiting, just memory. But word spread he was there. Former recipients of his candy came to meet him. Mercedes Wild, now 31. Peter Zimmerman, now 34. Dozens of others. Adults now, with children of their own. They brought their kids to meet Uncle Wiggly Wings, to say thank you, to show him what his kindness had produced. They told him stories. Mercedes became a teacher. She taught her students about the airlift, about kindness in dark times, about how chocolate on a parachute taught her that people are good. Peter became a pilot, inspired by Uncle Wiggly Wings, flew for Lufthansa, commercial aviation, carrying passengers, not bombs, building connections, not destroying them. He named his first son Gail, after the American who'd given him chocolate and hope. Gail wept listening to these stories. He'd thought he was just dropping candy, just keeping a promise to kids at a fence. He hadn't understood the ripple effects, how those children grew up grateful, how they passed gratitude to their children, how his simple gesture of kindness had multiplied across decades, how Operation Little Vittles had done more to build German-American friendship than any treaty or agreement, how chocolate proved more powerful than politics. The Berlin airlift demonstrated what free people could achieve. 3 million tons of supplies delivered by air. A city of 2 million kept alive for nearly a year. The impossible made possible through organization and determination. But Operation Little Vittles demonstrated something equally important. That kindness matters. That seeing former enemies as human beings matters. That chocolate on a parachute matters. The airlift fed Berlin's body. The candy bombers fed Berlin's soul. The Cold War continued for 40 more years. Berlin remained divided until 1989. The wall stood. The occupation persisted. But the children who'd caught those parachutes remembered that Americans could be kind, remembered that former enemies could be friends. When the wall finally fell, those memories mattered. The generation that had eaten American chocolate on handkerchief parachutes was the generation that reunified Germany, the generation that chose democracy, the generation that became America's strongest European ally. Uncle Wiggly Wings had planted seeds in 1948. By 1989, those seeds had grown into forests. Gail Halvorson lived to be 101 years old, died in 2022. For 74 years after Berlin, he gave speeches, attended reunions, met with former candy recipients, never stopped talking about the airlift, never stopped emphasizing the same message. Small acts of kindness matter. Seeing humanity in others matters. Choosing generosity over hatred matters. 2 sticks of gum shared with children at a fence changed thousands of lives. Not because the gum was valuable, because the gesture showed them they mattered, that they were seen, that they were worthy of kindness even after war, even after everything. At his funeral in 2022, dozens of elderly Germans attended, former recipients of his candy, now in their 80s and 90s. They brought their children and grandchildren, 3 generations. They brought the handkerchiefs, yellow and fragile but preserved. They brought the letters they'd written as children. They brought drawings of planes with wiggling wings. They brought gratitude that had lasted 74 years. They said, "Thank you. Thank you for the chocolate. Thank you for the hope. Thank you for showing us that people can be good, that enemies can become friends, that a simple gesture can echo through lifetimes." One woman spoke. Her name was Trouta Greer. She was 7 years old in 1948, caught 1 parachute, half a Hershey bar. She said that chocolate saved her life, not from starvation, from despair. She'd lost her father in the war, lost her home to bombs, was living in ruins with her mother, had nothing, no future, no hope. Then a parachute fell from the sky, American chocolate, with a note, "You are not forgotten. Someone cares." That changed everything, gave her reason to keep going, gave her belief that the world could be good. She grew up, became a nurse, spent her life caring for others, because an American pilot had cared for her, because Uncle Wiggly Wings proved kindness was real. The Berlin airlift is remembered as a Cold War victory, proof that democracy works, proof that free nations can cooperate, proof that tyranny can be defeated without war. All true, all important. But Operation Little Vittles is remembered differently, not as victory, but as compassion, not as strategy, but as humanity, not as defeating enemies, but as making friends. Both mattered, both changed history, but only one changed it with chocolate and handkerchiefs and wiggling wings. In Berlin today, there's a memorial, not grand, just a small plaque at Tempelhof. It reads, "In memory of Operation Little Vittles, the candy bombers who dropped hope on parachutes, who taught us that kindness heals, who proved that yesterday's enemies can be tomorrow's friends. Uncle Wiggly Wings and all who followed. Thank you." The memorial is simple, but on any given day you can find flowers there, left by people who remember, or by children of people who remember, or by Germans who learned the story and wanted to say thank you to Americans who chose kindness over hatred 75 years ago. This is what war can become. Not just destruction, but reconstruction. Not just defeating enemies, but making friends. Not just winning, but healing. The bombs Gail Halvorson dropped during World War II destroyed. The candy he dropped after destroyed hatred. One was necessary. The other was transformative. One won the war. The other won the peace. And winning the peace meant understanding that German children weren't Nazis. They were just children. Hungry, scared, hoping, deserving of kindness, deserving of chocolate, deserving to be seen as human. That's the lesson of Uncle Wiggly Wings. That seeing others as human changes everything. That small gestures ripple outward. That choosing kindness when you could choose hatred plants seeds that grow for generations. Gail Halvorson didn't end the Cold War, didn't tear down the Berlin Wall, didn't reunify Germany, but the children he gave chocolate to grew up grateful, grew up believing Americans were good, grew up choosing democracy, grew up building the friendship between America and Germany that exists today. His 2 sticks of gum, his handkerchief parachutes, his wiggling wings, they mattered. They changed the world, not through force, through kindness, through proving that love really is stronger than hate. This is the story Americans should tell about World War II. Not just the battles won, not just the enemies defeated, but the peace built afterward, the kindness shown, the bridges constructed, the friendships formed. Gail Halvorson bombing Berlin in 1945, then feeding Berlin in 1948. That's the complete story. That's the transformation from war to peace. That's what makes the greatest generation great. Not just that they won, but that they showed mercy after winning, that they fed former enemies, that they chose to see children as children regardless of nationality, that they dropped chocolate instead of more bombs. That's heroism. That's the story worth remembering. That's Uncle Wiggly Wings.